Football clubs are full of stories. Tales of greatness and of triumph, of joy and sometimes heartbreak. But there are stories and then there are legends. Thanks to McCafe, we will talk to some of the Geelong Football Club's greatest players and hear some of their greatest stories. Welcome to Legends of Kardinia Park. Hello and welcome to Legends of Kardinia Park. Thanks to our friends at McCafe, celebrating 30 years of sideline cheers and coffee that is well and truly fit for an Aussie. It's a new member exclusive series where we talk to some of the greats of the Geelong Footy Club. We dig into their careers and hear some of their best stories about their time here at the Cats. So welcome to Legends of Kardinia Park, and today's guest, Stephen Wells, recruiting manager. Wellsy, great to see you.
And you too, Cameron. Thanks very much for having me along.
It is great to have a chat with you. So many Geelong people love you for the work that you've done over many, many years. We hear from you occasionally around draft time, or regularly around draft time, when you pick up some of the young stars of the future of the Cats. But we don't often get to go back in time a little bit. We're going to do a bit of that today, which I know you love talking about yourself. But I'm intrigued. It's a career now that started at the Geelong Footy Club in 1984, going back a long, long time, but as recruiting boss in 1995. So again, a long period of time. You would have seen, heard, done so many things throughout that time. Maybe just to get started, your quick recollection and thoughts of the growth and change and the Geelong Footy Club that you obviously love so much.
Well, you're right, Cameron. I do love the Geelong Footy Club. I don't think I would have been here for 40 years without it, but obviously with brilliant support from all our executive and boards over the years and coaches, etc. But the changes have been enormous. When I first started, it was very much amateur football in that all the players had and coaches had jobs. There were only about 4 of us here full-time at the club at that time, and then as we got into the 90s and became more professional, and now we have hundreds of staff at the whole club, but within the footy department, 30 to 50 staff members, players full-time professional, the women's program, enormous changes, things that back when I started we couldn't possibly have foreseen.
You learnt off one of the greats of the Cats and a much-loved person, Bill McMaster. Did he sort of take you under the wing and teach you the recruiting game?
Well, he did, yes. I was very, very lucky. When I first started, my first job was up at Echuca as the country zone coach and development officer. Each AFL or VFL club, as it was at the time, had a zone, and I was based up there. Bill was the recruiting officer, along with Gary Fletcher as the football manager and the Geelong region manager. Ian McKenzie, a great name from our past, was still here as the football secretary, as it was, and that was about it. Terry Hogan as the CEO. But yeah, Bill, for some reason, for something that I'll be forever grateful for, and took me under his wing, as you said, Cameron, and it was great fun going around with Bill and his cohorts from the spotter group that Bill had that went to games of country footy and games interstate, and Bill would take me along, and I got to hear their stories and also learn from them about what they thought was valuable when recruiting players.
I want to get to the recruiting part, but I've just got to get this one out of the way really, really quickly. Were you any good as a footballer?
I was a bit slow, Cameron, funnily enough, but I tried hard and was lucky enough to be able to play out at Geelong West in a great era of the VFA. Played in a grand final and a preliminary final out there. We didn't win either of those 2 games in those 2 years I was there. Then I went over to West Adelaide and played under Neil Curley, which was a great experience. Neil was very good to me and loved the footy in the Sandful, loved South Australia. Before going up to Southport and playing under Norm Dare, who was coaching Southport for their first year in the QAFL. We won a flag, which was a great experience for me, great fun for me, and then after that, started working for the Cats.
Started working with the Cats. Now I'm going to embarrass you and say a very good cricketer as well, and an outstanding golfer as well. Obviously 2 loves of yours as well. But the recruiting part is the part that fascinates me, and I think a lot of the a lot of the members who will be watching this and listening to this, the art of recruitment of talented young players in their 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, sometimes 20, 22, 24 years of age and older. When you think of the great James Podsy Adley, who played in a premiership. When you're standing there and you're watching, let's say, an under-18 game, what's going through your mind? What's that little something you're looking for?
Well, it's a lot of different things, and in the end, it can really be as much as just a gut feel about someone. You might just see them do one thing in a game that says, oh, yeah, that looks a bit like what we need at an AFL level. But it's things like decision-making under pressure. I love guys that make really good decisions under pressure, whether it be with the ball or without the ball. The pressure might be the situation in the game where it's really tight, or a big game. The pressure might be that there's four blokes trying to tackle the bloke to the ground, but he's somehow still able to get it out to his teammate with a great decision. Great skill under pressure is important, I think. Of course, we'd like players to be able to kick the ball and handball the ball well when there's not that much pressure around, but if they can do that under pressure, it's a real plus for them. These days, you definitely have to have the athletic capabilities, competitiveness, and it doesn't hurt if they can take a mark as well, Cameron. But it's not totally definable, I don't think, even though these days we get a lot of stats and ratings of players, etc. But sometimes it can just be a bit of gut feel.
On that gut feel point, you're watching a game and it's without being disrespectful to any opposition, but an average or below average opposition, and somebody kicks 10, dominates, 40 touches, whatever position they're playing, just has a day out, versus it's a really good opposition and that player might have 12 or 15 touches and maybe kick 1 or 2 goals. That's where it comes to that gut feel. You understand that game is perhaps even better than the 10-goal, 40-touch game.
Well, it can be, that's right. And certainly if it's the same player who's been in that high-pressure game or the low-pressure game, you get some good opportunity to keep building your knowledge about that player. But I often, when I'm going to a game and see a young fella in a losing team, just do a few things and picture what he might have done if he'd been in the dominant team, the opportunities he might have had, or a fella playing full-back on the best player who kicks the 10 goals you're talking about. If he does a decent job because the ball was in there 100 times for the game and kept him to 10, that might be a positive. So it's moments, it's situations in games, and then of course these days we do so much work on character and find out a lot about them from their coaches and schools, etc., etc.
I want to get to that point too in a second, but just when you're watching a game, I imagine, given the amount of football that's played across the country, a big wide country, you don't get to see all the games as well. How important is it having a network, but a trusted network right across Australia, where if somebody who you've known for a long time comes to you and says, hey, this kid's got something, weighing that up versus seeing it with your own 2 eyes?
Oh, yeah, it's an important part of the information gathering process. And you're right, trusted people whose opinions have been reliable in the past, not so much with the star players, because they're reasonably obvious to everybody. We can go watch a game and all want to pick the number one pick from that year. But trusted, reliable sources from around the country who can just also see something in a player. Now, no one, in fact, gets it right all the time. We all make mistakes with our prediction of the future of what the footy career is going to be for these young fellas. But we've got a great network of spotters, and one thing that Bill McMaster had back in the day was a great network of people that he relied on as well. Can I just say, these days though, one of those big changes in footy has been that we do get vision of every game from around Australia now. Stats from every game, lots and lots of media, lots of speculation about where players might be selected, etc., compared to 40 years ago when it really was, if you didn't see it live, you didn't know much about the game.
Speaking of vision, does it also help when the father of a person sends vision to you? And I'm thinking of Max Rook here. When you get little ones like that, can you... I know people love to hear some individual ones, and it's going to be hard, but we'll try and individualise a little bit at times. the recruitment of someone like Max Rook, where Johnny Rook has sent in Vision and said, can you please have a look at this kid?
Well, yeah, it's what happened, and happens a little less these days because, as I said, there's there's so much information about players, more information these days than there used to be in the past. Even player managers getting involved, etc., etc. But yeah, back then we used to get a lot of letters. Used to get more letters in the years when we weren't playing well compared to the years when we were playing well.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, this person might be able to help you. And in this, I used to like to try and follow them all up. 95% of the players we did know about somehow or other originally. But yeah, John Rook sent down a letter about his son Max, and like all the others, I followed it up. And the thing that tweaked my interest there was the fact that Max was playing decent footy in the Western Border League, I reckon, over there with Casterton. But he was also a cross-country runner. He'd done really well in a school cross-country event. And so we got him down here and we did a beep test and got to know him, and he was a big kid, and watched him play a couple of times. One of my favourite photos at home from that era was my wife and I and our three little girls down in Mount Gambier, having watched a final with Max playing in it, and they went and did their thing, but we got a family photo at the time, not with Max. Yeah, it's just a little reminder of that era when we used to get to the country a lot and watch young blokes play. But yeah, thank goodness Max ended up here.
Yes, I'll back that up, the number of times he helped me out over the years. Unbelievably through this journey, and no doubt it certainly would have evolved through some zoning as we were headed to the national draft, and the way that all worked, and some of the compensation picks around when I think back to Fremantle coming into the competition, yep, and all of that. But heading into the more what we call the modern draft era, Geelong Footy Club hasn't had a pick higher than pick 7.
That's right.
Through that time. So a lot of and I'm keen to get into the how you build a list shortly, a premiership list. But you had to identify players who weren't necessarily the standout, hey, this kid is a top 3 pick. Can I focus in on the players who went around pick 7? And I think of, obviously, Joel Selwood being one of the greatest of all time, but Andrew Mackie, Joel Corey, more recently, Jai Clark. Those players who are clearly very, very good because they're top 10, but they're not next level good at that under 18 where they're top. Yeah, this kid's the number 1 pick, Harley Reid right now, and you think, okay, they're still excellent. How do I nail them at pick 7?
They are still excellent, all those names you mentioned there, and in most drafts there's a bit of depth in the drafts. It's not just about the number 1 player, and sometimes the number 1 pick, from my observation, it comes with a bit of pressure that not everyone copes with brilliantly well. But yeah, let's say in any given year there's normally a good first round of draftees, and then I often say to our team of recruiters as we're trying to find the next crop, there's going to be someone from this year's rookie draft who will play a lot of AFL footy, and we've just got to try and find them. So right through the draft, I think there's great talent. The names you mentioned there, and how do we try and get the best players we possibly can with every pick, let alone at pick 7. Yeah, it's just finding out about their character. It's hoping that they get through injury-free. They need a bit of luck with that. Adding to what we've already got at the time, and just showing that little bit of an X factor that is immeasurable, I suppose. But at some stage or other, all of those names that you mentioned there that have ended up at Geelong Footy Club, before they were drafted, they were stars in their own right in certain games. And when we look back, all of them could have, well, hopefully with Jai, but the other 3 could have easily been the number 1 pick in the draft.
I have heard you tell the story before, to focus in on one of those, Joel Selwood, that I think you told your wife before you left for the draft that if you had read out Joel Selwood's name, you were going to come home very happy.
Yeah, that's right. And there's enough. You can't say enough about Joel and the impact he's had on the Geelong Footy Club and AFL footy in general. But yeah, that story, the draft was on a Saturday morning back in those days. We'd already been lucky enough to have Tom Hawkins join us as a father-son player under slightly different circumstances to what it would have been these days. And So yeah, I mentioned to my wife as I left the house. She said, "Good luck," and I said, "Well, you'll know we've had a good day if you hear that we've called out Joel Selwood's name." And but all we can do is give players an opportunity. It's up to them to make it themselves, make the most of that opportunity, and not everyone does for a whole lot of different circumstances. But yeah, you could be drafted late in the 30s, or you could be drafted early in the draft, or you could be the last pick in the rookie draft. In the end, it's you end up at the AFL club, and you've just got to make the most of that opportunity that comes your way. And yeah, we've been so lucky with some of those names you mentioned.
I did have to laugh. I think a couple of those who were present at that draft may have even teased you in the following days and months after that one. That when I think you, please correct me if I'm wrong here, but Travis Boak, being a terrific local player, gone on to have an incredible career at Port Adelaide, and Joel Selwood were two of your favourites heading into that draft. Boak goes at pick 5. We've got pick 7. You were no doubt concerned that Hawthorn were perhaps going to pinch Joel at 6 and you'd lose Boak and Joel in the 2 picks before you. Those present said that for the first time, you almost fumbled and were a bit flustered. You were so excited to get Joel's name out.
I'm sure it wasn't the first time I would have fumbled and flustered. I reckon I'm a bit of a fumbler and flusterer. No. But anyway, they may well have read that situation very right, I reckon.
Fantastic. You touched on this already, the character side of it. We hear occasionally the stories of, I spoke to his school teacher, or we met his family, or spoke to a local footy coach or something who coached him a few times. How much of this do you actually do? How deep do you go into them as young men and not just footballers?
Oh, we go into it a lot. And fortunately, 99% of the young blokes we're dealing with are good young men. They're going to get a good character reference. They're going to love their footy and be driven. But we still have to do the work, just in case. We are strongly influenced by the people that we're drafting and the type of influence they can have off the field on our footy team and our club and our community. So we do a lot of work on that within our footy department. Our recruiting department. We rely a lot on those interviews and finding out about players.
What's the intangible you're searching for? Can you give us that, or is that still a trade secret?
The intangible. About the player's character.
Just that character. What's that something that if you could bottle that, you'd know?
Clearly, it's self-confidence. It's a lot of empathy for other people in the city. As soon as we bring a player into our club, it means that someone else has been delisted, or if they're getting a game for the first time, someone else is missing out on a game. People are going through all sorts of things in their personal lives that people need to understand about and not be too blinkered with. But leadership and determination and just being good community citizens, I think, is really important, and it's normally reflected in a footy team.
This might seem a strange question, so please forgive me. It's funny how when I reflect back occasionally on my career, my playing career, I can't help but every now and then I go back to the one we lost, 2008, more readily than I go back to the ones that we won in a strange way. I mean, I love when we start reminiscing and celebrating the ones we won, but every now and then in a moment, it's, why didn't I do that? Why we could have done that? So you wrestle with that one that we let slip in 2008. Is that at all similar in recruiting? The celebration of those you brought to the club, but are some of the ones you missed or perhaps didn't go with your gut feeling that you wish you had of, do they ever sit with you and annoy you a little bit?
That's an interesting question. It's not so much the ones we missed. We go into a draft preparing for all sorts of different scenarios and know that if there's players picked before us, you just got to move on and love the ones we do pick. But there's no doubt when players' careers don't quite work out the way we hope they would, whether it's been through a draft or you've brought them into a club as a trade. There's what ifs and disappointments. It's a results-based business. Not only do we want players to have good long careers, but we want them to play in a lot of winning games and help us win premierships, and obviously that doesn't happen all the time. But I feel just as strongly about the stars of our team, the guys that play in 3 premierships or captains, as I do about the fellas that might play just a few games but actually made the most of their opportunity because they weren't quite at the level, but they gave absolutely everything they possibly could. So, I really appreciate those ones that do make the most of the opportunity. The ones that don't quite make the most of it, we try and learn from and work out whether it was their footy or their character or whatever, and try to make a better decision next time.
You might not want to answer this, so you can brush it away if you like. But over the 40-year journey, is there one player who has run around for an opposition team that you just thought, oh, I wish we had him, or we should have had him, like that? Can you give us a name of anyone who's like, oh, I knew that?
No, I can't really answer that. In that, there's probably too many. I mean, I have great respect for the recruiting fraternity, the guys that do the similar job to what I've done over the years at all the other AFL clubs. I know they work so hard and they're doing everything they possibly can to get the right decisions for their footy club, and consequently there's plenty of players that get drafted or are recruited somehow, and I just admire the work of the recruiters at those other clubs rather than being too disappointed with what's going on at our place. And those players at other clubs, rather than saying we could have or should have, I'm probably more thinking, how can we get him in the future, or how can we get the next one like him in the future?
Our McCafe blend isn't just barista crafted across Australia. Our beans are also sourced from Kenya, Honduras, Ethiopia and Brazil, then roasted in Melbourne. Just another reason it's coffee fit for an Aussie.
I like that. Premiership building. It's never an exact science, as so many clubs have found, and all clubs have found. Can I zero in on a couple of eras? I want to get to the 2022 team and the building of that shortly. Self-indulgent here. The era that I was fortunate enough to play in and played with some of the most wonderful people and wonderful players. It obviously started a long way back from that 2007 in the years leading up. You think of the 1990 draft, which I was a part of, the 2001 draft as being the two sort of most high-profile ones, with Joel Corey and Paul Chapman and Corey Enright and James Kelly and Steve Johnson and Gary Ablett Jr. and Jimmy Bartell coming in those drafts. But it starts even earlier. Matty Scarlett's a father-son.
Definitely.
Darren Milburn goes in, I think the pick in the 50s perhaps.
Yeah, he did.
With his pick. Tom Harley comes from Port Adelaide. Cam Mooney comes from North Melbourne. How do you build a premiership team? Answer that one for me.
Yeah, well, firstly, a lot of people are involved in the decision making to putting together what might be some sort of a program that gives a club a chance to build a premiership. And yeah, it happens over a number of years. You're right, David Wojcinski was another one that we already had at the club. Even the influence of Tom Harley coming way back when he had played 2 games at Port Adelaide, to be able to convince Gary Ayres at the time that it was a good idea to bring in Tom Harley, and then for him to have the influence he had on our playing group in those couple of premierships that he played in. Clearly the coaches, in particular the senior coach, is heavily involved. In my 40 years here, I've been lucky enough to work with only 6 senior coaches. I think that's a great reflection of the club's stability, and the last 4 of them have all taken a team to the grand final, and multiple for a few of them. So once we get players here though, whether it be through the trades or the draft, you then have to have a program that gives those players the opportunity to be the best they can be. The whole off-field program, fitness, medical, coaching, etc., etc., etc. And then on top of that, you need a bit of luck. And then along the way, you need to be, I think, as a group, as a coaching, administration, recruiting group, you need to be pretty blunt in your assessment of your own team's potential, and be willing to make the changes you need to along the way, because it takes a long time to put together a team that can eventually win a grand final, but you've got a lot of steps along the way to do that. Not a great answer. I don't know if I've done exactly justice to the whole putting together a grand final premiership team there, but
no, you have, because it is such, as I said, an inexact science. Can I go inside my draft just for a second? the kid who was taken after me, so I was pick 38 and he was pick 47, I think, from memory. Can't find it in my notes.
Corey Enright, yes.
The kid from Kimber. Pick 47, or let's say in the mid-40s. I mean, what a pick. A games record holder for a period of time. Just one of the most incredible footballers to ever walk through these doors. From Kimber. I think, am I right in saying an opposition scout from Sydney went to watch him and fell asleep or something? Something like that might have happened. That might be one of those great wives' tales that you hear about in recruiting circles. But to get that, so you've got Joel Corey as our first pick. Then you've got a couple of picks that unfortunately didn't quite work out. Then you've got Paul Chapman, myself. Thanks for that, Wellesley. No. Appreciate it. And then this kid from outback South Australia. How did you construct that draft, and how did you end up with Corey Enright?
Look, to be fair, if we'd known Corey Enright or you or Chappie, we're going to end up the players that did. We might have tried to trade up earlier and not taken the risk that you were going to get through as far as you did. But we were lucky in that draft. We had 6 picks. Had some great advice from around the draft table on the day. Like, we've done this, we've done that, we've done that. Why don't we take Corey Enright now? Which was a bit of a punt at the time. I don't think any of us could have confidently predicted he was going to play more than 300 games and win a couple of best and fairest in 3 premierships. He was just a young player who he didn't show a whole lot when he went down to play at Port Adelaide in the Colton reserves during that year. Didn't play many games at all, but he did win the league best and fairest in the men's competition up in where Kimber were playing, and he'd just shown enough to take a punt on, and thank goodness we did.
This is where I'll dob myself in. I learned a valuable lesson as a young, probably arrogant footballer. 1 year in, he was drafted, same draft as me. He didn't play a game in his first year, a senior game in his first year. And someone asked me, said, what's that kid Enright like? I'm like, I'm not sure. Like, didn't really do that much. I don't know. Who knows? I don't think so. Like, thinking I knew everything at 19 years of age, because as a peer to him and same mate, you have no comprehension of those other things you're looking for and what they might develop in. You just see results based on then and there, and that's it. How wrong I was, because he went on and had one of the most phenomenal careers. Fast forward a couple of years to what they dub it as, the Super Draft.
They did, yeah.
The Hodge, Luke Ball, Chris Judd, not to mention the ones that we ended up with. Did you know going into that draft, we had a good group of picks, did you know that draft had that ability to be that special?
Yeah, I think we did. It's most drafts there's plenty of good players, but some drafts do just seem beforehand to be worth getting a bit more excited about, which is why sometimes teams trade into drafts with a few extra picks by giving players away or whatever it might be their calculated decisions to make the most of any particular draft. But that draft did have a great feel about it. But once again, all those players needed a bit of luck to go their way. Juddy had hurt his shoulder down here in the Vic Metro game, and so he needed to come right. We needed the right players to get picked around our players so that we could still have that strong Geelong influence that we like, as well as targeting players like Steve Johnson and even Henry Playfair, etc., just to fill certain roles in the draft.
When we talk about intangibles of drafts and picking up, I remember when you picked James Kelly and Steve Johnson in that draft, the first training session was a time trial, a 3K time trial. I don't know if you remember this. I don't know if you came along and watched. It was at Geelong College, at their oval there on their track. And I think David Clark Jr. was the best runner at the club at the time, and I was probably second best at that stage for time trials. And we were tipped to win the time trial. And these two young lunatics, Kelly and Johnson, just went out and just basically sprinted the first lap or so, 800 metres or so. And I remember Clarkie and I running together, but like pushing each other, but thinking, what are these two idiots doing? Two young blokes who are just going to blow up and we're going to destroy. They just held on and held on and held on and ended up finishing top 3, top 4 in the running on their very first session. It was that moment of sitting back going, two of the most competitive blokes you'll ever see. Did you know that when you see guys like that, and throw in Bartel as well into that, and Gaz Jr., I want to speak about him more in a second, that deep down inside there is this just ridiculous competitiveness, something that almost is immeasurable when you see them out on the footy field as a young player?
Yeah, I think we did know that about those guys, that whole group of players that we ended up drafting there. And in that year, I do remember going on a bit of a road trip with Mark Thompson, our coach, and going to the houses before the draft. And we went to a lot of different houses, but we did go to the Kellys and we did go to the Johnsons. And Mark and I both agreed when we came out of there that they're two of the sort of players that we would like to have at our club based on, I knew their footy a bit, Mark had seen a bit of their footy, but the people they were, obviously Steve had the brilliant footy brain and great personality, but the thing that got him over the line as being a brilliant player and being able to make the most of that unbelievable ability was his competitiveness. And it's hard to measure if someone's more competitive than another in a conversation, but just for some reason I remember coming out of those two houses with Mark Thompson and both giving ourselves reassurance that it would be a good idea to try and pick them. And the same with Jimmy, etc., etc.
I'm glad you felt that way. I've got to ask you about Gaz and the Ablett family. You saw Gary Ablett Sr. come through, working at the club, but also I'm sure as a fan too, watching that man play. But then Gary Ablett Jr., he was a kid who didn't play a hell of a lot of footy in juniors, and then had the year in the Falcons, I think, as an 18-year-old. You'll be able to tell this better than me. He was just a little kid, clearly with a great bloodline. What did you see as an 18-year-old kid?
Well, can I first go back to Gary Sr.? And one of the only regrets I have from my job here at the Geelong Footy Club is that I hardly got to see him play live. Well, I certainly didn't get to see him play live enough because most weekends I was off watching other footy, trying to find the next player. So I was a fan of Gary Ablett Sr. from afar, far too many times, but still lucky enough to see a few games that are deep in my memory. But and little Gaz. So the things I remember from Gaz, which is a long time ago, but I loved his creativeness with the ball. He was only little in the Falcons team, but he was very, very competitive again and very tough. Like he was playing on bigger kids, but he was. One thing I do like when I'm recruiting is seeing guys who can get a kick with or a possession because of their brain, not because of their physicality. And yeah, he was small, but he could win the footy under enormous pressure, and then brilliant at bringing his teammates into the game. He handballed a lot more than he kicked back then. Yep. And every one of his handballs, I reckon, for a year that I was watching, I can't remember one that was that didn't hit a target and sent a bloke on his way. And when he did get the chance to kick the ball, he was very creative as well. And then his first summer here at the Cats, he had a good summer, but then a practice match out here came on, and I think he kicked a goal in the first 5 or 10 minutes he was on the ground, and looked back around at the coach's box, and everyone, I think we all knew then that there was something special about young Gazza, and that's the way it turned out.
It was funny how quickly we, as his teammates, in that first year, realised how good his hands were.
Unbelievable.
If he was near a contest, we're like, oh, we might just work that bit harder to get over there.
Yeah,
incredible.
A brilliant team player, obviously a brilliant footballer, but a wonderful person in the community as well.
Agree. When you see that type of group, plus all those other elements, and we haven't gone through every single name in there just for because of time. When you see that all come together in that final moment of 2007, through 44 years of a drought and some near misses and some wonderful sides through the 90s, a close, hard-fought, tense prelim final against Collingwood, and then just an explosion on grand final day. What were you feeling at that stage?
I'm feeling a bit emotional like I am right now. You said before about being a Geelong barracker and a Geelong, I love. Oh, this is ridiculous, Cameron.
Shows how much you care.
I do care, but I care about the people who are in it. But I barrack for the footy club. But it was culmination of a lot of work with a lot of great people, and as a Geelong barracker on the day, I couldn't do anything on grand final day. I was just there watching with my family and having a great time, enjoying the Cats win that premiership. Yeah.
It was very, very special. I agree with you. And it meant
you told me you wouldn't make me cry.
No, I think a lot of people shared it to you on that day, knowing how much it meant to so many people. I'm going to fast forward, but it might get you emotional again because I'm going to talk about another premiership.
Yep.
Almost built in not a different way, I wouldn't imagine, but in a even more modern way, where free agency's at your disposal, where trades are much more, I think, easily done, plus some incredible recruiting as well. Putting together the 2022 premiership list, and I think of some of the names and some of the most high-profile names, but a Tom Stewart, who goes at pick 40 as a more mature age kid. Tom Atkins coming through the VFL and playing incredible footy as a VFL player here at the Cats and getting his chance. Brian Myers at pick 57. Some of the players that you brought in from other clubs to complement those players. Jack Henry, I think, was a rookie. Am I right in saying?
Yeah, he was.
Rookie list player. It felt you built it differently, but you still ended up with a premiership. Can I talk you through the building of that group and how do you pick a player like Tom Stewart or Tom Atkins?
Yeah. Well, you're right. It was a different circumstance to putting that team together. In that we were a good team around the time that team was starting to get put together, and so we had late picks in the draft. Free agency came in early soon after the 2011 premiership, so that was a different way of being able to recruit players, and just our circumstances were completely different, and extra teams in the competition, etc., etc., etc. There'd been compromised drafts for GWS and Gold Coast, so totally different circumstance, and giving Sam Menegola an opportunity late, or both Zach Guthrie and Jack Henry were rookies from that same draft as Tom Stewart and Brandon Parfitt. So how do we find Tom Stewart and Tom Atkins as players in a really good development program here at Geelong in our VFL? They're on show for everybody. So I was getting a bit nervous about that, particularly with Tom Stewart on the night of his draft. We'd made it clear to Tom earlier in the year that we were happy with the way he was going, but he still wanted to keep playing. He was that sort of character that he wanted. He was enamoured with the team he was playing in the VFL, and he thought helping them as much as he could was really important, which it was, and it worked out all right in the draft for us. Late pick opportunities for a guy like Brian Myers, we were confident that he'd make the most of the opportunity. Whether that was going to be ending up as good as he is, we weren't so sure, but he'd done everything he possibly could at under 18 level and deserved that chance. Of course, bringing in Paddy Dangerfield and Jeremy Cameron as two of the best ever players in the AFL to the club cost us a lot in terms of draft collateral, but we were happy to do it because we thought that was our best opportunity of winning our next premiership. And every decision we make, it's about winning the next premiership.
Can I ask that just quickly? I was going to ask you something else, but you being a recruiter at heart, giving away picks, how do you wrestle with that? Knowing the quality of a Dangerfield and a Jeremy Cameron, I get that, but how much do you think, I wouldn't mind a couple more of those picks?
Well, it's a dilemma that every club faces all the time, and in a role I had back at that time when I was doing the recruiting and the list management, it's I'd like to think I was across what the value of the picks was and the opportunities that would be forsaken at the draft in order to bring in some ready-made players. And there's a cost and a benefit in every decision you make. Cost and a benefit in extending a player's contract as opposed to freeing up a list spot, etc., etc. But if it doesn't work out and we missed out on those players, we would have gone to the draft and used those picks, and hopefully that would have turned out all right. But We always had the opportunity to say no to the trades for Paddy and Jeremy, no matter what the cost was. We could have said no. We chose not to, and I'm glad we chose not to.
I'm glad you chose not to as well, Wellsy. Just before we get to 2022 and the culmination of bringing that list together, obviously lots been spoken about that period where lots of top four finishes, a grand final in 2020, bowing out in prelim finals. You'd obviously put together a very, very good list. But as you said, you're always trying to put together the next premiership list. Did you think that you'd got it pretty right, but not quite right? Were the doubts starting to creep in, thinking, oh, actually, hang on, we haven't quite got it?
Oh, my personality is always, there's doubts, always questioning whether we should be doing something different or how's it going to be better next year than it was last year. And but fortunately, working with great coaches and stability within the place keeps reminding us that we're heading on the right track. I think it's reasonable to question what you're doing, and most of the time we question, but then we're able to say, yeah, let's just keep going with this or try and improve in that area, and we'll give ourselves another chance. And for 2022, really three players that changed the team a bit, I think, were Tyson Stengel coming in through an unusual circumstance where he was a delisted free agent, so we were able to just convince him to come, which helped us a lot. Max Holmes, who we'd done an enormous trade for, trading our future first-round pick to bring Max into the club in his draft year. Helped us in that midfield, and then Sam de Koning down back as a tall who was able to, in his own way, play the positions that Harry Taylor and Lockie Henderson had played for us for a long time, and did a great job for us. Sadly, Max didn't get to play in the grand final, but he was an enormous part of us getting there. So those three positions, three young players, just changed the dynamic of the team a bit, and I think we are also sensible enough here, as far as when we don't quite win the premiership in those years when we were top four, to acknowledge that other teams are doing it well also, and we can't possibly take anything away from those teams that did have the ultimate success in those years, and try to learn from them and see if we can just tweak things to be a little bit better ourselves.
Did it even surprise you though how incredibly dominant that team turned out? The run from, I think it was round 10 onwards, the qualifying final was one of the most thrilling games. I was there with my kids, and I remember jumping up and down and carrying on like a complete pork chop. But then to go prelim final, grand final, so unbelievably brilliant football and dominant as a team. To see again that all come together after close, maybe some doubts creep in, as you said, that natural two happen, and then just go bang in the two biggest games of the year and destroy the opposition. Yeah,
it was as a Geelong supporter, it was just beautiful to watch, obviously, and I think every genuine football supporter would say it was beautiful footy, but it was a surprise to that it all came together so dominantly in those last couple of games, because the teams we were playing were terrific teams in their own right, and on a different day, who knows, there might have been a different result. But in the end, I think our players just had developed that resilience from being close but not quite there in the previous 10 years, and then everything went our way. Everything went right. We had nearly full availability, all except for Max in that last game, and the confidence that the team had, the maturity they had, it all seemed to fall into place. And you even let a Hawthorn person in the door for Isaac Smith to win the Norm Smith medal. Well, I have great respect for Hawthorn and admire what they've been able to achieve, and it was great that Isaac wanted to come and play at the Cats, and it was a targeted recruiting event in that he was a free agent, had a choice, had a few different choices, and he thought that there was a good opportunity for Geelong to have that ultimate success in the end, and we're very, very glad he chose the Cats.
we're going to finish it up in just a second. I do want to ask you just a couple of little specific ones, and this gets to the heart of some recruiting decision, because I'm just intrigued about how you can do it and do it so incredibly well. Harry Taylor.
I am.
So please correct anything I'm asking here. Matty Egan is All-Australian centre-half back in 2007. A foot injury, last game of the year, heartbreakingly misses the finals. But at that point, and misses the premiership, obviously even worse, doesn't play footy again. But at that point, the season ends and you head into the draft. Matty Egan's still the All-Australian centre-half back, and maybe off-season, pre-season, gets his foot right and he hits the ground running. Did you make the Harry Taylor pick thinking, what if with Matt Egan? Did you take the Harry Taylor pick because you were going to take him anyway because key position players are gold? He's mature age, it wasn't an under-18 player. What was the process and mindset around taking someone like Harry?
The process was we thought he deserved a chance. He hadn't dominated waffle footy, but he'd shown, I suppose, all the different aspects that you would like from a key position player when playing the waffle. He was playing a bit up forward, he was playing in the ruck, and he was playing down back. And we thought there was, if he could put it all together, there was potential there that he could make a success of it as a forward or a defender, probably not in the ruck. As it turned out, because of the circumstances with Matt, he got more of an opportunity down in defence than he might have if Matt was around right at the very start. But I'm sure those two could have played together very, very well. It wasn't as calculated as saying we better get a backup here just in case Matt doesn't make it back onto the field. It was more key position players are gold. We were picking quite late in the first round, obviously, from the premiership the year before. I remember on that night we had a choice between going with Harry or Scott Selwood. And obviously with the connection through Joel, it would have been a great choice for us to also take Scott. But I rang Bryce Selwood on the night of the draft and said, sorry, we just went for a different type of player because we just, that key position player type was gold. But Harry's determination.
You were too scared to ring Marie? Scott's going with Adam over the other side of the country?
Not quite. But Harry, another one of those people who, through his character and personality, made the most of an opportunity that came his way, and still having a strong influence at Geelong Footy Club.
He certainly is. One more I'm always intrigued about, and I actually want to get to the true story around what he did, what he saw, how it all came about, because you hear commentators saying that he was an Olympic runner and all this sort of stuff. But Mark Blicavs, what a footballer he has turned out to be. Multiple best and fairest winner, All-Australian, incredible in that final series of 2022, part of the premiership run, and just a great leader clearly around the club. I believe it's a link to the Guthries, but how did that one come about?
It's genuinely true story, and so grateful to Andrew Guthrie for taking the time to make a phone call to me not long after we drafted Cam. Cam was with us and was an emergency for the 2011 premiership team in his first year at the club. But Andrew Guthrie said, look, these Cat Bs are coming about, and I coached Mark Blicavs when he played footy as a 14-year-old, and I reckon he shows a bit of potential. He's still great mates with our family, the whole family is, and I know he has a bit of a kick around with his brothers and things, but I reckon he's worth you having a talk to. And who would have thought, if we hadn't drafted Cam, we don't get Mark as well. So forever grateful to Andrew Guthrie, and whatever it is that happens in the world that makes us end up with Cam Guthrie to then end up with Mark Blicavs, where it could have gone another way. It's one of those strokes of luck that you need in order to put together a very strong team.
Was he was delayed in getting here, or because he was Olympic trials? Is that right?
That's right. So we spoke to Mark and his family about trying to have a go at being a Cat B rookie, but he was very determined to first see if he could make the Olympic team. I think it was for the London Olympics. He was trying to be 1500 metre and then a steeplechase. He was having a go at the steeplechase, and I reckon selection was right up until about June that year. So he went over to Europe and was trying very hard to qualify. Didn't quite have the time to get into the Australian Olympic team, but came back to Australia in about the middle of the footy season. Played a few games in our VFL team, which went on that year to the grand final, and he actually didn't play that year in the reserves finals team. But from round one the next year, after a brilliant summer, he's been a feature of our team and unbelievable player to watch.
Oh, incredible footballer, just a wonderful player and such an important player.
Yeah,
obviously,
enormous.
I did joke to poor Joel Selwood. One of the few things that didn't go. He's so competitive in wanting to beat everyone in any time trial that he was in. I fortunately used to pip him in the 3K time trials right up until when I retired. And then when I got out of there, I think Simon Hogan did it for a year.
Yes.
And then Blitz just took over and won everything since then. So I think that would have just annoyed the hell out of Sal that he could never quite.
Yeah, may well have. Just watching Blitz do his time trial, let alone watching him play footy, it's a pleasure to watch. But again, it's like the character. We brought Mark to the team or to the club because of his attitude. From a very high achieving sporting family, so he brought that elite athlete mentality with him, and he made the most of an opportunity through pestering the players and the coaches for information. So much pestering's not quite the right word, but just trying to get as much information as he possibly could about how to be an AFL player, and we see what he is today.
Certainly a good player. I'm dying to ask you, out of all that 40 years, your favourite player, but I know you're never going to give me an answer for that, so I'm not even going to bother.
No, I can't do it. Well, I actually haven't got one. I can't do that. It's I love them all, but yeah, clearly some are more talented than others, and some have a big influence through their leadership roles, and others are just great fun to be around. No, I can't answer that question, but I do have a soft spot for every one of them.
I won't ask you who your favourite kid or grandkid is either, anything like that. All too hard of questions. But Wellsy, thank you so much for having a chat with us today. Thank you for everything that you've done over that time, and are still doing. Still got many, many years to go. I hope we're not going to lose you to the golf course anytime soon. So thank you for coming along and having a chat today.
Pleasure, Cameron.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.